So first, just to level set, I am RC and I run the webinar and content programming here at BuildOps. And in case you're not familiar with what BuildOps are, we are all in one platform specifically built for commercial contractors. You're talking about project service, talking about growing your pipeline, your lead generation, all of the above. We do it all. So you can check us out at buildops.com to learn a little bit more about what we do and how we can help you. But for right now, what we're talking about here is about data centers and the boom in the data centers. And for like inside baseball kind of stuff, we do these webinars regularly, and there is no comparison to the level of interest that this particular topic has garnered. This is huge. There's a ton of people still piling into the call right now. So we know that we struck a nerve here. This is something that's really important. So we're truly, honestly, humbled and excited to get Matt Koenig here from Haynes to talk a little bit about this. He knows a thing or two about this topic, and he's a great speaker, and he's got a wonderful backdrop there. So Matt, why don't you give yourself a little bit of an introduction? And as he introduces himself, just as a heads up, I'm going to be popping up a poll question here. You'll see it on your screen. You're going to see about 4 of those throughout the entire webinar experience. It just helps us kind of level set, like decide what we want to talk about, change course if we need to, and also to figure out what we want to talk about for future episodes. So, Matt, tell
Yep.
us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, RC. Appreciate the invite. My name is Matt Koenig. I'm the general manager at Haynes Mechanical Systems. I'm calling out of Denver, Colorado. That's where we're based out of. Our company is about 250 employees. We were a Train franchise since 1968. We separated from the Train organization in about 1995 and really became an agnostic service provider. We've got 4 locations, 3 of which are in the state of Colorado and 1 in Phoenix, Arizona. And we primarily work in the mission critical space, commercial office, hospitals, healthcare, and of course, data centers. So thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, happy to kind of speak to any of the questions that come through and just our experience working in the data center vertical market.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. I'm going to keep this poll open for a little bit longer just to make sure everyone has a chance to answer it. But so far, just for you all know, the question is, ever done work on a data center project before? And the majority says not yet, but interested, which is kind of, I think we envisioned that this is an area of opportunity for sure, but not everyone has quite able to put a foothold in it quite yet, which is why we're having this conversation right now. So as I leave this poll up for a few more seconds to make sure everyone has a chance to answer that, um, I do want to ask, like, so basically, one of the reasons why I did this webinar is because I see a bunch of, I subscribe to a bunch of magazines, industry trade publications, what have you, and I see these ads, like literally full page ads, even specifically for like verticals, like for plumbing and for electric or whatever, and it's centered around data centers. So clearly, like there is a need here. That's what piqued my interest. I'm like, man, people are spending a lot of money on these ads specifically about like data center and like how to fit the fold of that. So can you, being boots on the ground here, can you tell us a little bit more about the mass actual like boom of data centers going around in North America?
Yeah. I think everybody has seen it in their space. With with AI and with cloud hosting, these
Mm.
companies just need massive amounts of space and facilities to handle all of that data and all that traffic. And you're seeing just a giant amount of investment across the board. And over the past, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, you have these pockets within the United States that are more established data center markets, places like Virginia and Phoenix, Dallas, Atlanta, Oregon. Um, and what you're seeing is that these parts of the country are running out of resources, whether it be, energy or water or whatever it is. And so there's this kind of boom into tertiary markets, secondary markets, places like Denver, places like Austin,
Mm.
Texas, Iowa, state of Pennsylvania, Minnesota, where you're starting to see all of this investment. And so, you can see big investment firms just dumping money into capital to bring these facilities out of the ground. And these facilities are, can be massive. Places like Google and Meta and Microsoft are the ones that you think of, but there's tons of investment in these types of companies that are building these co-location facilities to basically lease out space, much like an office building leases out space to a tenant where people can store their data securely. And those facilities are coming out of the ground like crazy too. So it's a great space to be a part of. They care about the reliability of their systems and the people that are coming in to work on their systems, and they're willing to, invest a little bit more in that. It's much different than trying to work in a market like the retail sector or restaurants, where if the AC goes out, yeah, it's a problem, but it's not costing them millions of dollars, a minute or an hour type of problem. And so if you can align yourselves, and your technicians and your company to look at that, it's there's a lot of potential. Um, I can speak for Haynes. We've been dealing in the commercial real estate market for many, many years, and that market's not great right now. There's a lot of
Yeah.
problems with, commercial real estate and the devaluation of office buildings and not enough tenants in the building, so not enough money coming in for building owners to afford, capital projects and that sort of thing. And so, we look at data centers as, hey, this is this is the next, 20 years of our future. So how do we align ourselves with that market?
I'm going to share, hopefully everyone gets this in Zoom. I never trusted. This is a blog post that we wrote a couple of weeks ago that kind of rounds up some statistics that Matt kind of alluded to as well, including like the sheer massive amount of data running through Virginia alone. I think there's a cool stat there about like in Pacific Northwest, where I'm from, over the next 10 years, it's going to be more energy is added there to equate to 7 brand new Seattles. It's just enormous, the amount of uh, energy that's going on there. Matt, before we dive into like these folks care about the folks who come in and they're willing to pay extra for certain things. I do want to dive into that a little bit because I think that some of the specifics of that's really important in terms of like skill certifications and training, all that stuff like that. I do want to get a little tactical here and nitpicky and make sure that people know the difference between these two things. So you had mentioned these mega centers, so that like specifically Meta, specifically Amazon own, I think like their own centers, right? But then there is these smaller co-location facilities, which may or may not be more likely, I think. Are there the differences that from a commercial contracting standpoint that folks should know about these two different types of facilities?
Yes. Yeah. And so in our world, you have, what's defined as it's an enterprise level data center, which really means that if you're working with a corporation, let's say, for example, I don't know, like Visa, for example. So credit card company, they have their own commercial real estate. They have their own data centers that Visa personnel, manage, and it's all Visa data that takes place that runs through, that data center. That would be more of an enterprise level data center. Now, those data centers can also be hyperscale data centers, which are these massive facilities. Um, you could have a hospital, for example, or a hospital network that has their own data center. Again, that's an enterprise data center because it just serves their data. And then you have these co-location facilities, which you have companies like Quality Technology Solutions, which is QTS, and they're what's known as a co-location facility. So they build these massive data centers and they market to companies that don't want to have their personnel, don't want to invest in the real estate themselves to have their own data center. They say, hey, I want to store my data with you. Um, and then you have Microsoft and Google and Amazon, AWS that have these hyperscale data centers that can be co-location facilities. They're just on this massive scale. And it's important to know the difference because they care about different things. Um, and so, getting into that a little bit, if you're looking to get into these facilities, either from a maintenance agreement standpoint or you're a construction company and you want to get attached to a general contractor or an architecture firm that does these, yeah, I think there is some valuable points to just understand the difference between some of those data centers and how you can position yourselves to align with kind of the wants and needs of the different needs of those types of companies.
How does one, so how does one go ahead and do that, right? How do they identify the specific needs of those? Like, and you don't have to, obviously there's certain levels of things you might not want to share as well, right? But like for folks who do want to learn how to start getting stepped into this world, what are either the strategies they need to do to find this information, or is there some just higher level stuff that they can work with?
Yeah. So speaking from my experience and the experience of Haynes, and Haynes is not a ground up construction company. We're a service company. We work primarily in the existing building space. So after the building is already built out and the warranty period is up, then Haynes comes in as a service provider. And so understanding that you have let's say you have a co-location facility, and maybe they've purchased an existing building that was an enterprise data center for another company or whatever it is, and they're coming in, they're looking to do infrastructure upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
um, However, if they're only 20% leased, kind of like an office building, you know they might have needs like they need to overhaul a chiller, or their crack units are all data air crack units, and data air is now out of business and you can't get parts for that type of equipment anymore. It's understanding the priorities of, yeah, great, I know we need all of this stuff. However, money that we have coming in the door is just 20%. So let's focus on that 20% of the facility or whatever that might be. From an enterprise level data center, it's, a lot to do with security and clearances and some of those things. And so how do you kind of position yourself to align with those? And then, what I would suggest, what we've done to kind of get started on that, is to figure out maybe some of the trade associations in your local region. Trade associations like AFCOM, AFCOM, and then in our market, we have the Rocky Mountain 24/7 exchange. I think the 24/7 exchange might be in other markets too. But that gets you exposure to customers. It gets you exposure to lunch and learns, where you just get the lingo of what's happening in those different types of data centers, and you can align yourself, with some of that.
Awesome tip. Appreciate that. You've mentioned now, and by the way, this is not just for Erica, not just for Thorane, but for also everyone else as well. Pipe in. I mean, I like to hear myself talk, but if you all, Erica and Thorane, by all means, if you have any questions, go ahead. And for everyone else who's in attendance, your Q&A is a great spot for you to just ask questions, whatever it may be. You can, whatever you want to ask, I'll answer it. So moving on, you talked about this a couple different times, Matt, and so I want to really drill down into this a little bit. Certifications, training, security clearance, a little bit more like that. Uh, can you talk a little bit more about, so someone who's not a shop that's never done this before, what's the gap, right? Like, are there many things that they're doing already with other contracts, with other vendors, with other companies they're working with, that cover the basis of data centers, or data centers that much more net new, different, sort of like, oh crap, like there's a lot of work for us to do to get our shop in order to even be able to be considered for one of these contracts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends on the makeup of the current your current customers. If you're working in the manufacturing space, or you're working in larger industrial space, there's a lot of parallels. Like there's nothing extra that you really need to do there. You have to have your OSHA certifications. OSHA 10 is a big one for us right now, of making sure that you have the safety, your EMR rating in place. Um, but what we typically find is that most data centers really utilize 3 to 4 main brands of equipment.
Right.
On the, kind of, if it's a big built up central utility plant, or a chiller plant, chilled water plant, you could have any of the big four manufacturers, Trane, Carrier, York, Daikin, as as your chiller. And then as you get into the facility, typically you're going to see Liebert equipment, you're going to see Stultz equipment, you're going to see, different others, kind of custom units out there. But primarily what we see in our market is Liebert units, Stultz units. And so if you have technicians on your team, experience with that, great. If you're trying to align your company to do more data center work, maybe that's something you can think about from a hiring process, hiring
Mm,
perspective of, hey, if we're going to bring a technician in for the interview, do they have experience in the data center space? Do they have qualifications? Have they been through Liebert, certified training? Um, Another, trend that's happening in the data center space and the HVAC space, just in general, is you do have some of these manufacturers that understand that it's hard to get skilled trades people. So there is a bit of a push to make their company and their equipment more proprietary. So you can go, I mean, you can get you can get certified through the mechanical portions of some of this equipment, but some of the controls piece are still a little bit proprietary, and they prefer to kind of do that work themselves, which is kind of a rub sometimes a little bit.
interesting. Yeah.
But just kind of understanding the makeup of the different types of equipment that exists in data centers and trying to position yourselves, if it's truly what you want to do, then maybe start thinking about it from a hiring perspective. How do we get people that are, that we could go to a customer and say, hey, we've got 4 or 5 guys that are Liebert certified or Stoltz certified, and these guys have done a lot of work in data centers. Let's talk about how we can support your facility. That goes a long way.
Is this part of the bid? Like, is that conversation or documentation, whatever, part of how you bid to make sure that you stand out against the competition?
Yeah, 100%. Yes.
In what way? Like, what do you? I mean, again, share
Yeah.
what you want to share, but like, in what way are you sharing this information with these prospects?
So, the initiative is to always go out there. The objective is to always go out, if we're trying to, and I'm speaking pretty much exclusively, I'm trying to get a new maintenance contract with a data center right
Yeah,
now.
right.
So, if you're identifying who you want to work with, trying to get the contacts, to have a conversation maybe before that bid goes out, maybe, instead of just kind of resting on your heels to get an RFP, it's, hey, what things can we do proactively to identify the data centers in our marketplace? The titles that we want to engage with and interact with in the data center space is critical infrastructure manager, data center manager, operations manager. If you have, people speaking to those at that level in the data center, you're in the right space. Um, and so trying to have that communication before an RFP obviously goes out is ideal. Then when the RFP does come out, yeah, I mean, everything that you can do to go above and beyond the basics of submitting that RFP to showcase your own personal strengths and working in the data center space on the qualifications of the level of technicians that you have, their certifications, the amount of data centers that you work in, if you can get kind of humming in that marketplace a little bit. Um, those are all huge.
Mhm. For the poll that I just asked, it was how prepared is your crew with required certifications for data center jobs? The majority, 34%, said not yet, but it's in the plans. The minority, 11%, said we're fully certified and ready, which is not surprising. It's nice to see that a lot of folks are, it's in the plans for them. What is surprising, well, not surprising, but since I included the question, I assume people would answer it, is that honestly, I'm not sure, is 29%. So a lot of folks are not even quite sure whether or not and so that, ignorance is more dangerous than not even being ready, right? So understanding what certification skills and even security clearances that your team needs in order to be competitive clearly is an important first step, or else, you're lost to other competitors who have that information. Before we move on to something else, I have a question here that I want to ask. Is there any certification requirements for working in data center for O&M? Generally, I'm not seeing that being drilled down from end-to-end perspective. They're okay with having experience with O&M, but not specifically in data centers.
I might need just a little bit more, clarification on whoever asked that question. But if we're talking about certifications, and if you're saying O&M of like operating and maintaining operations and maintenance, I think that's what you're asking. So if there's certifications, for that piece of it, again, it comes down to, in our experience, a bit of a relationship, and then, what do you have kind of the minimum to pass go? Do you have, can you showcase that you have experience in that market? Can you showcase that you have a certain amount of, technicians that are on your staff. Going back to the other part of that poll too, the 29% that are, undecided or unclear.
Mhm.
I mean, make no mistake, you have to kind of go in with both feet, saying, hey, we do want to get into this space, because the response times are expectations are a lot different than like a retail
Oh,
area.
interesting.
You know what I mean? Or if you're supporting like hospitality or whatever it is. I mean, they can be pretty demanding as well. But for a data center, I mean, I think pretty much in all of the RPs that I've seen, and they'll even have SLAs, commitments that the contractor will make as entering into an agreement with the data center to say, we will show up within 4 hours, of an emergency, or 2 hours in emergency in some cases. So it's just it's being aware that it's just a different kind of animal that you're going into. The certifications side of things, I don't think we haven't seen too much that are kind of strict, like, hey, you have to meet these certifications of, at this level of certified technicians in Liebert equipment or whatever it is. It's just really more of your ability to um, provide exposure that, yeah, yes, we have this many data center clients, or we have this many technicians that have worked on, this equipment in the past, and just showcasing your ability to work in that critical space. I don't know if I answered that question very well, but I probably need a little more clarity on what they were asking for.
We got a bunch of questions coming in. I want to make sure we only have, I mean, I like to keep these at 30 minutes. So technically we have 7 more minutes left, but maybe there's some bleed time here. So many
Sure.
questions. But one question I have here is there certain requirements for the level of insurance a company requires to work in or on data centers?
Uh, I would say yes, there is. Like, it varies from customer to customer. I think off the top of my head, I think we have a $10 million umbrella policy that usually works there. It is interesting, I mean, if you're a contractor that also works in the building automation space, and you're trying to do building automation work within a data center, the cybersecurity insurance, is
Mhm.
something that we've seen a big ask for. And there's, in some cases, it could be up to, $5 million, and that's hard to get sometimes, and it's a big push to the premium in some cases. But I think it depends, would be my guess, the best answer for that. It does vary
The
from
best
data center
answer.
to data center. And yeah, I'll leave it there. I have more to say that we could probably jump to, but we can keep kind of answering questions too.
I think that also just to lean into something that you said, that to clarify that the response time is really critical, right? It's really critical that you're able to be flexible and responsible with emergencies, what have you. And the interesting aspect of that also, as well, is like, again, like maybe not everyone on your team has the certifications or security clearance to go into a data center. So it's knowing and understanding that you have that availability of people on your team to be at the ready whenever. So that's an interesting like jigsaw puzzles, whatever you want to think about, of configuration, that you need to have something in order in your house to make sure that you can deploy pretty fast and pretty efficiently, confidently, knowing that the right people are going to that spot that can answer this problem fast. I think it's a unique issue that folks need to make sure that they solve before they go into the space.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, folks on the call are already doing this, I'm sure. I mean, it's everybody has demanding clients that are, something breaks and you're servicing and you're the preferred vendor, then they're calling you and they're saying, get out here now. Um, it's just a different level up of, hey, if this stuff goes down, then it's, the consequences are a little bit different, in that case. And usually data centers are built with a certain level of redundancy. So there should be, a fallback in case, cooling goes out for one section, or
Yeah.
whatever that might be. Um, but in some cases not, and there's all kinds of data centers. You have smaller, like, more private ones that are just being started up, and maybe have, 4 to 6 cracked units, and it's relatively smaller scale. And then you have these giant ones. So it kind of depends. You don't have to go into it thinking, oh my gosh, I have to have all this set up because they're all going to be like this. They're not. You can kind of get in, to maybe some of these smaller places if you want to dip your foot into that a little bit and just get exposure to what that's like, and then keep building from there. But it is, it's not unlike a hospital or a medical office building or a surgery center. If you have experience
Sure.
there, just something that's it's critical, right? So if it goes down, it's a big deal.
Uh, Crystal got an interesting question here. What is the best way to get in touch with the correct context to even have these discussions for bids?
Yep. It's a great question. I would just put on my sales hat here, and it's if you scour LinkedIn, to be honest, and you could find a bunch of people with the titles again of like critical infrastructure manager, operations manager, data center manager, and look into your kind of region or whatever it is, and just put together some sort of campaign to call those people, cold call those people, email them just to get something set up. Um, Stuff's changing all the time. People move all the time.
Yeah,
It should be people, are open if you just got to be persistent a little bit to get your foot in the door. But that's how you start having a conversation. Is just to get an initial conversation with some of these people start up. That's, it's the doing it that way is the most effective, maybe least efficient, but that's the way that it kind of works. So it's just to try to get
absolutely.
it going that way.
And you can also use other tools. I won't name any specifically, but there are some tools that I know of very intimately
A
that help you
software
identify.
platform that yeah might help you out to kind of get into that. Sure.
Yeah, for folks on the call, we do have tools that help identify. I mean, Eric can talk a little bit better about this, but do exactly that, right? Help identify the right people to have conversations with, even at the specifically at the right time. Eric, you want to talk a little bit about that for a moment?
Sure, I'll unmute myself. You guys are on such a roll. It's hard to like figure out when to break in because there's so much helpful information that's coming through. But yes, to do a little bit of a product plug, I'm happy to talk a little bit about a tool we have called Pipeline Plus that helps identify when folks are in market and are looking exactly for the type of services that we're talking about here. But I don't want to continue to bogart this conversation because I know there's still a boatload of questions that are coming through that I'm sure would love Matt's wisdom.
Yeah, and we'll also just for the folks, I'll also sum all this up, all the takeaways that Matt had, and I'll email you all tomorrow with the summation. So maybe some of you took notes. If you did, bravo, you are like near and dear to my heart, amazing to you. But don't worry about it. I will give you that in a link in an email tomorrow. I do want to ask this particular question here. So I'm not sure if you know this or not, Matt. We do a fair amount of drone work performing aerial inspections for AEC. Is this something that the data center space is actively using, either from asset maintenance work or job site data capturing?
Hmm. That's cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question. In my world, I would see a lot of value in that in more on the prospecting side, to be honest, of a data center
Mm,
is a pretty nondescript building, right? Kind of like
yeah.
my view behind me. But if you can find some, a warehouse looking building with a bunch of gear on the roof that doesn't look like it belongs there, big condensing units and an air-cooled chiller outside, cooling tower, something like that, you know that something's there. So, as you're driving by, or if you have, if you're doing some drone footage on that, that's kind of cool. From an asset perspective, yeah, that's a good question. I've never seen it used that way before, but again, we're not on the construction side, so.
Hmm. Can we talk a little bit about asset maintenance and management? Is there anything that folks on the call who don't do data center work should know that's a little bit different about data centers? Is it something trickier? Is it like, do you need certain things that you need to make sure that they have, or is it pretty conventional? And if they're doing something good right now, that it should transfer over pretty easily?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot that goes into maybe the the turnover or maybe the startup side of a relationship like that, where you're maybe showing what the service reports might look like coming from your organization and just aligning that with the customer's expectations. As long as you can show some sort of reporting of, hey, we looked at the voltages, the amperages, we've tested temperatures, whatever that needs to show. data centers will have their own expectations of what they need to put into their systems. And so, we get asked a lot, hey, can you just like make yours sync up with ours? And it's like, some cases, yes, some cases, no. Sometimes it's more of a, hey, let's get on a monthly, call to build this relationship up so you can see what's coming from our technicians, and then how do we input that into your system. I know, Build Ops is working on a lot of APIs right now to connect with some of these types of systems, but it's an interesting piece. We're starting to see, it's probably 2 or 3 years into it now, but you have all these commercial real estate firms like CBRE, Jones Lang LaSalle, Cushman Wakefield, that are very much in the data center space. They're working on a national or even a global level to say, hey, we'll manage all your facilities. And they very much have their own systems like Corrigo and other systems out there that are, there's a bit of an administrative requirement to connect with those systems and make sure, even, from an asset tracking, documentation of work, billing standpoint, it all has to flow through some of that stuff. So that's another piece to the puzzle.
I do want to be mindful of folks' times as I posed my second to last poll. I have one more poll, but it's a nice one that is more of curiosity for anything else. I kind of want to start wrapping up a little bit here. Eric, I keep on thinking you're not muted because I guess you're muting on your headset. So I keep on thinking you have something to say, but I'll assume that you're muted or you have nothing that you want to contribute right at this moment, right? So
That's correct. Sorry.
no problem. But Erica did ask a great question that I wanted to make sure that I include in here. So I'm going to end this poll here. I'm going to launch one more poll in one moment. It's more so about basically the reality of what's going on here. We can't talk about everything in this webinar. That would be insane. We'd be here for 3 hours, right? So we're talking about very specific things right now, but I would love to know a little bit more about like what other things you want to know about this. And some of this, you guys whose questions we have not answered yet, will inspire some of this as well. But if there's anything you've ever wanted to know about data centers that we haven't talked about yet, or is still top of mind for you, would love for you to just submit those answers into the poll. That helps us understand what we can do in the future as well for future webinars, articles, whatever it may be, right? But I do want to ask this one thing as a kind of a closing out, Matt, for this is, I'm going to read this right from your words, Erica. So hopefully you wrote them beautifully. What advice do you have for a contractor who hasn't touched this kind of work yet, but wants to break in? So like, what's the one smart first step that could happen this quarter before the busy season kicks in?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Oh, Erica stumped him. Erica stumped Matt. Look at this.
That's a great question. The first thing is just, I would say, identify what types, identify maybe some of the data centers that are in your space. And I don't know, if you have a sales team, or if you're trying to do that from an operations or an ownership perspective of, still trying to get out there and understand the landscape, in your region. But I think if you start to kind of figure out what do you have there, what existing data centers are in your space, if you're staying on top of the news, what data centers are being built in your space. If you're in one of those new emerging markets, paying attention to the data centers that are coming, to your space. I think that's step one, is just, hey, deciding, yes, this is a direction we want to go because it makes business sense for us. We see the future here. If you've made that commitment, then you can start to identify, maybe those types of facilities that are in your kind of service area. And then it's just starting to interact, and then trying to get things off the ground. And yeah, you may well enter into one of those relationships and it knocks your socks off, because you weren't super prepared. And certainly I can speak from experience. We've certainly done that before. We've kind of, stepped on our own ourselves. But then you learn from that and you kind of keep going. And for us, it makes sense. It's the amount of money being poured into this market it's something like we've never seen before, even on the kind of the .com, boom, in the early 2000s. It's very much like that. So if you can get, in front of it a little bit and kind of understand maybe what pivots you need to make as an organization to be prepared for that, if that is truly something that you want to pursue, then, it's getting prepared for it.
Incredible. Matt, thank you so much for your time. Folks whose questions we don't get to answer, we will do our best to follow up, I promise. And again, you'll get an email from me specifically tomorrow with a recap of this wonderful chat. And hopefully you'll join us for future conversations as well. Erica, Thorane, Matt, thank you so much. Everyone who joined today, appreciate your time. Have a great Wednesday and go Mariners. Yikes, I said it. Bye, everyone.